Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I'm your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are talking about the sweet spot, the intersection between localization and your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Again, your DEI initiatives. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, an independent community of solopreneurs just like you folks out there. All right, to participate in the comment section today, you must be in YouTube. Also, while you're in YouTube or the other social platforms, please hit the subscribe and like button. That will allow us to better serve you as well as let you know when we are going live. And also, you can catch Clubby on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Ingrid Christensen, president and founder of INGCO International. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
And for those of you in YouTube, you can see Ingrid's email address. If you don't happen to be in YouTube right now, Ingrid's email is ingridc@ingcointernational.com. You can also add your comments into the section there, and we'll try to weave them into our conversation best as we can. All right, Ingrid, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, and the various things you're up to these days.
Awesome, Rick. Again, thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to be here and chat with you a little bit. Welcome to all of the listeners and viewers. My name, again, is Ingrid Christensen. I'm the president and founder of INCO International. INCO is a language service company, and that means that we provide document translation and interpretation services. I started the company about 15 years ago. In February, we turned 15, and it was a typical freezing February morning here in Minnesota, and hiked myself down to the Secretary of State's office in downtown St. Paul to submit my articles of incorporation to launch what is now INCO. Of course, I had very little creative energy going at the time. I was mom to an infant child. My son was born in September, so he was just a few months old. I was in the midst of my MBA program and feeling a little sleep deprived. Therefore, came up with the very creative business name of INCO International, which quite literally, Rick, stands for Ingrid's company. So
I was wondering about that. I thought that I was going to ask you that question, so thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, so if you need some naming help, I can certainly help you. Rick.
All right, little technical difficulties. Thanks for your patience. And here we go again. Again, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Ingrid Christensen, president and founder of INCO International. Welcome, Ingrid. Again, her email is in the comments field. Ingrid, tell us a little bit about yourself, your firm, how you came up with that fabulous branding for your company name, and why don't we just kind of start over? And again, folks out there, appreciate your patience. Sorry for the little technical snafu.
Thanks again, Rick, for having me on. Thanks for being flexible with technology. It is our friend and our foe. So happy to be here, happy to share a little bit about who we are and what we do. Again, my name is Ingrid Christensen. I'm the president and founder of INCO International. We are a language service company. That means that we provide services like document translation and spoken interpretation in about 200 different languages. So organizations that either sell products or services to a multilingual audience and or employ or work with multilingual individuals, that could be other clients or employees, students, etc., would utilize our services in order to facilitate communication. But I'm going to start with the great story, Rick, of my amazing marketing skills. So 15 years ago, February 6th, actually, was, if you're from Minnesota, you know, February mornings was a freezing cold morning, um, very, very chilly. And I hiked myself down to the Secretary of State's office in downtown St. Paul with my packet of paperwork. I was going to register the company. And I'll try to make this story short, Rick, but I got up to the front, and I don't think that the clerk really appreciated the fact that I couldn't figure out what I was going to call the company. And basically, she was like, "Just go back to the end of the line and come back when you figured out a name for your company." But as all busy entrepreneurs do, I had no time to go to the back of the line. So quite literally, I came up with this genius of Inco, which is Ingrid's company. So pretty creative. I'm available for naming consultations if you need them, Rick, because you might want to start your next company called Rickco pretty soon. But it has turned into a little bit of a joke. If there's employees that are trying to be funny and tell me what to do, I may say, this is Inco, not, Hannah-Co or Abby-Co or something like that.
Democracy Co.
Democracy Co. Yeah, I mean, I get to choose really at the end of the day what I call myself. So it's been fun. It's been fun.
And talk a little bit about how your interests in foreign language came to be.
Yes, thank you. So I grew up in Minnetonka, Minnesota. So those of you from Minnesota know that it's a western suburb. Not exactly the most diverse area to grow up, especially in the 90s when I was had the opportunity to grow up there. But I did have the opportunity to study French. I started in junior high, so studied French junior high and high school. Was walking through the halls of Minnetonka High School and saw a poster advertising an opportunity to do a study abroad, to be an exchange student, a Rotary exchange student. And I applied and was gladly and luckily accepted by the Excelsior Rotary Club to spend a year in Denmark as an exchange student. That year taught me probably more about myself than it did about Denmark and the rest of the world. But most importantly, what it did is that it opened my eyes to a whole world of opportunities that I quite literally didn't have any context about. I didn't know, certainly I knew that the world existed, but it just really opened up my eyes in a whole new way and exposed me to a lot of different people and opportunities. In my year in Denmark, I was able to learn Danish and came back really with a renewed sense of I can do whatever I want. The world is literally at my fingertips. Somehow along the way, I decided that I wanted to learn Spanish and did have the opportunity to live abroad and study Spanish extensively. And so that's really how my interest in languages started. I will say though, Rick, I think that learning languages comes much easier for me. I do joke that I'm a linguist. I'm not a mathematician, much to the unpleasant realization of my bookkeeper and my accountant. They really prefer me to be much more advanced in my in my math skills, but I like to go back and just say, I'm a linguist, not a mathematician. So that's how I originally became interested in languages.
Sure. Well, we all have different skills, and as long as you know what you're good at and what you like, and maybe stay clear of the math and or the branding, and just stick with the language, you're good to go.
Exactly, right? The biggest and best use of our time. So I'll stick with what I know.
Yeah, and then talk a little bit. I know COVID, very serious matter. 500,000 people in the United States have lost their life. Many businesses have been shut down and maybe not going to come back, et cetera. Very challenging. With that said, for your company, with the explosion of content and folks needing to translate that content, COVID has actually, in some ways, been helpful to your business.
Yeah, a very, very. I recognize that COVID definitely has affected people differently, and we are in a very fortunate position to be in the language and communication business. And we know that language is essential, and it's actually our primary core value is to value the language of all people. And I will say that because of the very work that we do, we have found explosive growth this year in thanks to COVID. It sounds a little, unfair to thank COVID at this point, but really what has happened is that our clients have a nonstop amount of communication that they need to get out in front of people, not only in front of their customers, but their employees. And, as I mentioned before, we serve both corporations as well as nonprofit social services, community-based organizations, school services, school districts, and healthcare services. And that amount of content that needs to be translated, because COVID is changing every single day, right? What was true yesterday is not true today. And making sure that people have a very clear understanding of how their lives are going to be impacted by COVID requires a lot of translation services. So I will say that we definitely have seen an uptick specifically from our community-based organizations, but also our corporate organizations. Really, I don't think that organizations had a lot of time to stop business. Businesses have had to reinvent themselves quickly and figure out how they're going to still continue to provide the services and products that they are. And so corporations haven't been any different in that aspect. They really have to communicate even more now, especially if they're doing business in other parts of the world. So knock on wood, luckily for us, COVID has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise.
Sure. And for you, obviously, language has played a key role ever since junior high and high school. Talk a little bit about your interest in volunteerism and how that is a big part of your life and some of the various things that you've done.
Yeah. So I think even when I was young, I was very interested in leadership opportunities and giving back into the community. I always felt like it was the right thing to do. And it also really made me feel like I was playing an integral part in society and also learning. I really, one of my core personal values is constant learning and learning opportunities. And the opportunity to learn from other people and other experiences is something that I always tend to gravitate towards. As a professional, I've had the opportunity to be very involved in a lot of different organizations, from different chambers of commerce to different, nonprofit organizations. I currently sit on the board of directors for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. As a state chamber, it has really exposed me to the economy of the entire state and really what makes the state tick. And it's been really eye-opening as far as running the business from a small business perspective and how I can kind of fit in to the environment of larger and medium-sized organizations. So that's been a real great blessing. I've also served on other boards like the American Red Cross. I was on that board for a while. Like I said, I sat on other chambers of commerce, the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce. Became involved with the Chamber of Commerce early on in their Young Professionals organization. Was really looking for a way to connect with other young professionals that were like-minded, like myself, and people that I could connect with. So grew a great network and lots of great friendships and relationships out of that early kind of involvement in the chamber. And as other organizations, we are women-owned certified through WeBank, and they have a variety of executive education opportunities available to certified organizations. And so that's been great to get exposure at a national level and access to information and networks at a national level as well. So Rick, I think I'm one of those people that looks for opportunities to get involved. It's always been a win-win for me. And I've always gotten way more out of it than I've put into it. So I'm always kind of looking for new growth opportunities.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Thank you for what you do. So in the fabulous branding that I've done for Club E being short for entrepreneur, folks are either starting or growing their business. you told me that you got going into the business side of translation as a translator. How did you make the leap from, hey, I got this job as a translator, now I want to build a company and go do all these other things? Talk a little bit about just your personal journey of making that leap.
Yeah, so I still call myself an accidental entrepreneur, but I was very intentional about when a door of opportunity opened, I had the wherewithal to walk through it. So I'm very grateful for having taken that leap. I was a Spanish interpreter by training, worked my way up into different certifications. And almost at the same time, I had too much work. So I was hiring friends and colleagues to do the work. And I went to do an MBA program because I thought I was going to get a real job. I thought that it was time to grow up and get a real job. But before I kind of made that leap, I realized I kind of have a business here. I had always had an interest in owning a business and starting a business, was never really sure what that was going to be. But then I thought, well, heck, I'm here in this MBA program. What better opportunity than now to try to figure this out and see if this is a viable business idea? And so I launched in 2006, like I said, and really from the beginning, my focus was to build an organization that understood what it was that linguists do on a daily basis. It's really, really hard work. It's way more than just being bilingual. It requires skill sets that are acquired over years and years of training and experience. And so I really wanted to focus on, I understand what it's like to do the work, and I understand the amount of respect and training that it takes to do the work. And I wanted to try to bridge that and make sure that that was well understood by our clients. So that was my reasoning, and that was just about as much thought as I put into it.
Well, that's a lot of thought, and then just having the courage to act on an opportunity is a big part of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and business leader. So that was good.
Yeah, thank you. I think as I mentioned before, I was a single mom to an infant child in the middle of an MBA program, a little bit sleep deprived. So I think all of those details really helped me be a little fearless and launch this organization.
Well, serendipity or luck always plays a part in things. So
Exactly.
So, reminder to our audience that you could submit your questions if you would like. We will do our best to weave them into our conversation. So please do that. Also, hit the subscribe button. And if you're enjoying today's conversation, hit the like button as well. All right, so let's start into maybe the more meaty part of what we're doing here today. Talk a little bit about why companies should care about DEI and the various diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that they might participate in.
Yeah, so DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a big, massive concept. I approach it from the premonition that everybody recognizes that DEI is really important and that we have to take actionable efforts in order to actually move the needle. So I come from the assumption that we all recognize that this matters and that we need to care about it. And 2020 really rocked our worlds in a lot of different ways. And as I had a lot of extra time for reflection and thinking, and really started to recognize that the work that we do, the act of translating content from one language to another, is really embedded in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Really, the why that we do what we do is to ensure access, to ensure that everybody has equal access to communication. And I started to think more and more about what we call empathetic localization. So for us, empathetic localization is really understanding the nuances, the meaning behind the source content, so whatever we're translating from, and making sure that we capture all of that content and all of those nuances into the new language that we're translating into. And then that kind of flowed into this aha moment, Rick, where I figured out what we do is a very actionable item that somebody, it's an action, it's a tactical action that somebody can take to actually move the needle on their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And here is why. Because we believe that when you speak to somebody in their language, you're able to really connect to that person. You're able to communicate to their heart. You're able to communicate in a way that makes them understand what it is you're doing and how you're communicating with them. And that really is the way to start moving the needle and start showing people that you care and really starting to have a very tactical impact on those diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
And talk a little bit, I mean, obviously language is at the center of all this. Talk a little bit more about how language plays a part in DEI.
Yeah, so we believe that language, really understanding where people are coming from, is embedded in DEI. There's a lot of different tactical actions that somebody can take, from hiring and training, and I mean the list could go on and on. But from our perspective, like I said before, just it's really understanding how you can talk to somebody and how you can get into their hearts and how you can start to develop a relationship with somebody. And what better way to really show that you're inclusive, that you're inviting, that you're open to diversity, that you're willing to accept people for who they are, than to speak to them in their language and to really try to forge that bridge of communication.
Okay. And then what about just an individual company, as business leaders look at their own staff and they only speak English? What about that?
Yeah. Well, if you have an English only spoken environment, my guess is that if you really spend some time asking people not only the language that they prefer to speak at home, but a little bit about their background, maybe their different cultural beliefs, you're going to figure out quickly that not everybody is exactly the same, right? We are made up of a lot of individual unique attributes. And so really spending the time and asking people and opening up those conversations, you'll find quickly that not everybody does indeed speak English. There are organizations, we hear this all the time, where people will say, well, our language of choice, the language we speak at work, is English. We just do business in English. And that may very well be true for you, for your perspective. But maybe take a second and recognize that maybe somebody doesn't feel comfortable conducting all levels of business in English. Maybe there's HR or personnel issues that would be much more comfortable if they were able to communicate in another language. Certainly when we think about safety, workplace safety, and the importance of training, we know that the level of cognition and the level of understanding is raised so much more when people are actually able to comprehend all of the content. So while, yes, we may be able to communicate, hi, how are you? How was your weekend, in English, which is great. But when you're training on, very precise and specific workplace information and safety, especially, sometimes that information is much better consumed in language. So somebody actually has a very deep understanding of what that content is.
And then I assume there's a variety of actions. You've listed a couple of here. Any other kind of short-term things that business leaders or owners might do?
Yeah, I mean, we like to think about things from, inclusive hiring practices and really welcoming, asking people, what is your preferred language? What language do you like, do you like to work in? And it's not necessarily that we're expecting organizations to now start switching to doing business in, 5, 10, 20 different languages. English could still be the primary language, but what we're asking people to do is to consider that maybe somebody's language preference is different from yours, and maybe you don't even know because we haven't even taken the time to ask. And so really just slowing down and asking people, what is your language preference? How do you prefer to fill out this information? And when you think about, for example, benefits enrollment, well, I don't know about you, Rick, but I am so confused when we have to do benefits enrollment and figure out what all these different acronyms and different paperwork is. And it's a confusing process, regardless of the language that you speak. And if you don't have bilingual control over English, imagine trying to figure that out and decipher your way through benefits enrollment in a language that's not your first language, right? And you certainly want to be able to expand those benefits to all employees, but let's think about ways that we can make that accessible to all of the employees. And one of those ways would be to deliver that information in other languages.
So a whole host of different reasons for folks to consider speaking other languages, or catering to people who don't speak English. But for a workplace that is English, why or what are the list of reasons why they should consider other language other than maybe some of the things that you've mentioned already?
Well, the other thing is that, thank you for asking that question, Rick. So, if you truly have an English spoken only organization, then maybe this is a moot point, right? Maybe it's not necessarily something that you need to spend a lot of resources on. But more and more organizations are much more international and much more open than they ever were before, especially now in COVID when we're all sitting in all parts of the world getting our work done. You don't know necessarily where people are, and really having the time and the energy just to ask people, what is your preferred language, and making sure that you're, meeting them where they want to be met.
I like that, meeting them where they want to be met. I'm with you on that one. Reminder to our audience, if you'd like to participate with a question, Ingrid and I will do our best to weave it in. Just put it in the comments section and we will try to get to it. All right, how about this? So I grew up in a Spanish second language house. My parents thought it was important, so we started taking Spanish in school. Can't say that got all the way to fluency, but certainly proficiency. Anyway, how do businesses or business leaders decide which language they should translate into?
That's a great question. I would say translate into the language that people speak, right? There's the majority languages in Minnesota, for example. Spanish is probably at the top of the list, but there's other languages like Somali and Karen, and now we're seeing, Vietnamese and Russian. Certainly, that wave of immigrants came early on, and now there's more languages every day popping up. Eritrean, Oromo, Arabic. Lots of different varieties of languages, and really understanding what it is that those individuals speak. There's not a week that goes by when we don't get a request for a language that sometimes makes us say, I don't know if I've heard of that language before, right? So even in areas like Albert Lea, Minnesota, we have groups of families from Micronesia that speak very, very rare language dialects. And there's not a lot of people in Minnesota that probably know that, right? There's these little pockets of individuals that tend to kind of stay together. The family unit tends to stay together. So recognizing that new languages ebb and flow across not only Minnesota, but across the country, and quite frankly, across the world. We've heard a lot about, and I won't get into politics, Rick, but we've heard a lot about the migrants at the U.S.-Mexican border, and a lot of those individuals speak languages other than Spanish, right? There's a lot of indigenous languages spoken in Mexico and Central America that are real challenges, not only to organizations like my own, because we just don't have as many resources in some of those languages of lesser diffusion. So there's lots of different languages, and it's constantly ebbing. It constantly ebbs and flows. It always changes.
Okay. Question from Rob, longtime listener and participant in the Club E community. Thanks, Rob, for your support. Rob's question is, how far away are we from digital translators such as Google Translate being indistinguishable from natural languages?
That's a great question, Rob. And it's one that actually comes up pretty often. People always ask me, do you think that Google Translate is going to replace you anytime soon? Here's my answer to that. Things like Google Translate, and Google Translate is probably at the top of the advancement in skill level, right? Google spends a lot of money and they have a lot of resources to try to get this right. Something like Spanish that is very, very well written. So the English is super well written. So it starts with a very well written source context, source document. If it's really well written, there's no jokes, there's no idioms, it's pretty basic. I'm going to give Google Translate somewhere between 30 to 60% accuracy, depending again on the source file. So what I tell clients is that if your content only has to be understood 30 to 60%, great, that's awesome. My guess is that most people need their content to be understood at a much higher level than 30 to 60%. Now, I want to emphasize that that quality really relies on a super strong original piece, right? It has to be written at a 3rd to 5th grade level. It has to be super basic, no double negatives, all the old school things that you were taught by Mrs. whomever was your English teacher in 7th grade. You got to go back to those skills, and that's how we have to, really be writing that source content. Otherwise, the machine just doesn't get it. They don't pick up on the nuances. They don't get the jokes. They don't get, the acronyms. They don't get a lot of the stuff that if you're a native English speaker and you're reading it, you're able to understand. So, I'm not really concerned about digital translation providers replacing us. What we do know, however, is technology has shifted our field just as much as it's shifted everybody else's field. And you cannot be successful in the interpretation or translation field if you do not accept technology and become very, very familiar with technology. Technology is 100% changed the way that we do our work, and you have to be a technologist to be good at this job.
Okay. And then a reminder, thanks for the question, Rob. Anybody out there wants to ask Ingrid a question, we will do our best to weave it in. So for the business leaders out there, where do they even start?
Where do they even start in regards to translation services?
Yeah.
So I would say that really think about, who is your target market? And depending on your business, if you're selling products or services, your target market might be Europe. Your target market might be immigrant populations within Minnesota, within the US. So you really have to understand what is your target market. And your target market doesn't always necessarily have to be the person purchasing your services or products, right? Your target market might be your employees. It might be the community in which you serve if you're a nonprofit. So really think about who's going to be reading the content, who's going to be accessing the content. How do I need to get this content in front of my target market? And another thing that I like to point out is accessibility is not just written. A lot of times full accessibility is verbal as well. So just because you may have a document that's written in English and you want to translate it into a number of different languages, but you really have to figure out, does your target market, whoever's going to be consuming the content, do they have the reading skills to be able to comprehend the content? So for a lot of our clients, straight translation is not necessarily a valid option. Sometimes they need to do oral versions of different content to make sure that people can understand it.
Okay. And you and I touched base, I'm going to guess maybe 3 to 5 months ago, regarding one of the Brimacombe Capital companies, B2B SaaS product, thinking about doing a Spanish version. So how about trying to assess the costs attached to trying to offer, in particular, B2B solutions in other languages? What advice would you give business owners to try to figure out the cost side of the equation to launch other language versions of whatever it is they're trying to do?
Yeah. The $1 million question, right? How much is it going to cost? And so the thing about language services is that it's tricky to put a for sure price tag on, but just kind of a real rough overview. So translation is anything written, right? It's a document, it's a website, it's instructions, it's manuals. So translation at its very base is usually priced per word. So we look at the total word count, we figure out how many languages is it going to be translated into, and how complex is the document, right? That's one kind of piece to figuring out translation pricing. There's other things that go into it because a lot of translation work requires us to get into the design files. So we're working either in InDesign or Illustrator or within the back end of somebody's website. So some of those costs are more technical in nature. So that's kind of translation pricing 101. Now, when you look at interpretation pricing, then you run the gamut, right? A basic over the phone service is priced by the minute, and a very complex corporate simultaneous job can be priced by the week or the month, right? So it really, really varies on the type of service that you're looking for, the complexity of the project, and the language. There are certain languages that tend to be higher than others. So there's lots of questions that we need to ask our clients in order to even present basic pricing, because it is a little tricky.
Sure. So a question from Eric M. Also, Eric is a longtime listener and participant in the Clubby community. Look forward to seeing you again in person, Eric, when we start doing events. Anyway, Eric M.'s question is, are you looking to offer translation services to the healthcare services community? So how much business are you currently doing in the healthcare world?
Yeah, so we basically serve two different verticals. We serve corporate organizations, and then we serve community-based organizations. For us, community is anything healthcare, social services, nonprofit, and schools. Of those kind of that fit in that bucket, school districts and healthcare services are at the top of our client base. It's a growing division for us. I just launched that division 3 years ago. And now that is run by a full-time staff of, I think there are 5 individuals now that run that. So it's a growing field. It's a very needed field. Healthcare interpreting, Rick, we could talk about that for months on end and never really get to a conclusion. It's very, very complex. Language is an accessibility issue when it comes to healthcare interpreting and you know, a medical necessity. So there's a patients have a right to receive healthcare communication in the language of their choice. But it's very nuanced, it's very difficult, and that is kind of peppered with a variety of different certification requirements that really kind of vary state by state, city by city, and healthcare facility by healthcare facility. So yes, the short answer is yes, that is something that we are currently expanding our service level offering in.
Okay, so lots of times I ask this question as it relates to their business journey, but you've had such an interesting personal journey. I'm going to just expand into your time post high school. So you go to Denmark on this exchange program. Your travels into Mexico lead you to Chiapas in southern Mexico, and then up to the border and living in both of those places. And then all the different things you've done through your career. So obviously a lot of lessons learned along the way. If there was something that you learned that was impactful that you wish you would have learned sooner, what would that have been?
So I would say that as a woman leader raised in Minnesota, my experience has been that I tended to not ask for what I needed. I was raised with this concept of you know, hard work pays off, right? The early bird gets the worm. And so I don't think that I lent I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't ask for enough help. I didn't lean on different resources as much as I could have. And so I would say that that's something that I wish I had done a little bit, a little bit differently. And also really understanding that every business is in business to make money. I'm in a really feel good business. I love the work that I do. We're empowered by as many people as we can provide communication access to. And so it's essential work, it's feel good work, it's required, but we can't do more unless we're profitable, right? You're gonna know, you know this, Rick, right? And I'm sure you you
I'm
tell your
nodding. I'm nodding. Yeah.
body, right? And it almost takes a mind shift to recognize that to be in business, you got to make money, and to provide more services and more products, and to do more good work, you have to be profitable. And I think it took me a little bit to figure that out. It was, I didn't come at it necessarily thinking that, we're going to be the next biggest organization. And I certainly, that's not our intention. Our intention is to grow. Our intention is, to have great profitable growth and great revenue growth and be able to serve people, because the work we do is really good and we're really, really good at it. And we're really passionate about the work that we do. And so people should rely on us and they should work with us. But we can't do more until we make more. And so that's an important lesson too.
Okay. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
So our talk today, obviously a lot of interesting things that we've gotten to, but if you wanted to leave the audience with one key takeaway from our time together, what would that be?
I think that I would lead with I know you want one, but again,
I'm agreeing with you. We've been friends for a lot of years. I will give you two, maybe even three.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, again, numbers aren't my thing. I'm more about the words. Okay, here's what I would say. I would say that first of all, being bilingual doesn't necessarily make you equipped or prepared to be an interpreter or translator. There's lots of skills that go into that particular work. So that's one thing that I think people need to wrap their head around and really understand what it is that how do we do the work that we do? Because it is super hard work and it requires the brain to work in ways that most of us aren't naturally inclined to do. So I would say that that's a big takeaway that I wish people would take. From a business leader perspective, I would say that if you have an idea and you're passionate about that idea, that it's never too late to shift gears. It's never too late to try this thing called running a business out. There's, a lot of great ideas that I think people sit on for too long because fear stops us. And if I've learned anything in life, actions are a result of one of two things, either love or fear. And I think that too often fear stops us in our tracks and doesn't allow us to live our best potential and our best lives ever. So those are my parting words for you, Rick.
All righty, I like it. So Ingrid, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, either to talk about any of the nonprofit volunteer work that you do or to learn more about INCO, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm Ingrid B. Christensen. I think there's me and there's an artist named Ingrid. And so I'm not the artist Ingrid. I'm the linguist Ingrid. So don't get us confused. Also, my email, I believe, is in the chat there, but I'm ingridc@incointernational.com. And you can also find us at www.incointernational.com. And so there's lots of different ways to find us.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ingrid. Look forward to having you back again. Appreciate you folks out there in the audience for sitting tight and bearing with the technical difficulties. And Ingrid, again, thank you very much. You're doing great work both inside and outside of your company. Look forward to having you back.
Thanks so much, Rick. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.